The massive observation deck of the Stellar Alliance flagship stretched like a cathedral of technological marvel. Holographic displays flickered with intricate star charts, each glowing point representing centuries of galactic exploration and conquest. Admiral Zara stood motionless, her 4 crystalline eyes scanning the latest reconnaissance data from the outer rim of the Orion Arm. Her species, the Luminary, had long ago transcended biological limitations. Generations of genetic engineering and quantum consciousness integration had transformed them into beings of pure intellect and technological perfection. They moved between star systems like thought itself, conquering and assimilating civilizations with such efficiency that resistance had become a forgotten concept. The current data stream focused on a small blue planet designated as Sol 3, buried in an unremarkable sector of space. Preliminary scans showed primitive technological development, rudimentary space exploration, limited to a few fragile satellites, and tentative missions to a nearby moon. The planet's inhabitants, called humans, seemed typical of early-stage civilizations the Stellar Alliance had encountered thousands of times before. Preliminary assessment complete, announced the ship's central intelligence, its voice a perfect modulation of logical precision. Species classification: technological level 0.7. Projected integration timeline: approximately 37 standard cycles. Admiral Zara's neural implants processed the information with lightning speed. She had personally overseen the assimilation of over 200 developing civilizations during her extended service. Each followed a predictable pattern: initial resistance, followed by rapid technological capitulation, and finally, complete absorption into the Stellar Alliance's vast network. The human planet displayed all the familiar markers. Their communication networks were fragmented. Their global governance structures remained divided by arbitrary geographical and cultural boundaries. Their technological progress was inconsistent, with pockets of advanced research existing alongside massive regions of limited development. It was a textbook case of a species on the cusp of either self-destruction or potential awakening. Junior Analyst Kren, a younger luminary still bound by more traditional biological constraints, approached the Admiral with additional data compilations. His holographic projection trembled slightly, a rare display of emotional response that would have been immediately corrected in more senior personnel. "Admiral," Kren began, his voice carefully modulated, "our deep scan analysis reveals some unusual computational patterns emerging from the human communication networks." Zara's attention shifted, her crystalline eyes narrowing. Unusual was not a word commonly used in Stellar Alliance reports. Efficiency, predictability, and total understanding were their hallmarks of exploration. The holographic display reconfigured, showing intricate data webs emerging from the human planet. Unlike the structured, linear communication patterns of most developing civilizations, these networks seemed chaotic, unpredictable. They branched and reconnected in seemingly random configurations, creating complex information ecosystems that defied standard analytical models. "Explain," Zara commanded, her neural interfaces already probing the data streams. Kren manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific communication clusters. Their information exchange appears to have no central governance. Individual units, humans, seem to generate, modify, and distribute knowledge with remarkable speed and apparent lack of coordinated direction. What would have been confusion in a less evolved species registered as mild curiosity for Admiral Zara. The Luminary had long ago optimized their civilization into perfect, predictable systems. Every technological advancement, every social structure, every communication network was designed with maximum efficiency in mind. These humans seemed to operate on an entirely different principle. Their networks suggested a form of collective intelligence that emerged not from top-down control, but from spontaneous, decentralized interactions. "Prepare standard integration protocols," Zara ordered, her decision already processed through multiple predictive algorithms. "We will approach the human planet using standard absorption methodology." Little did the Stellar Alliance know that their standard methodology was about to encounter something truly extraordinary. The humans of Earth were not just another civilization to be cataloged and conquered. They were something else entirely, a spark of potential that would soon challenge everything the galactic powers believed they understood about intelligence, adaptation, and survival. The first encounter was imminent, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first wave of Stellar Alliance ships entered the Sol system with calculated precision. Massive vessels that dwarfed entire human cities emerged from quantum-fold space, their surfaces a complex matrix of adaptive metamaterials that could instantly reconfigure for maximum defensive and offensive capabilities. Captain Vorn of the lead assault vessel, the Luminous Spear, watched the preliminary targeting systems lock onto Earth's orbital infrastructure. His neural implants processed millions of tactical scenarios per microsecond, each projection confirming the anticipated outcome with mathematical certainty. The human defenses would collapse within moments. At the United Nations Emergency Command Center in New York, a desperate silence hung over the gathered military and scientific leaders. Massive screens displayed the incoming alien fleet, their technological signature so advanced it seemed almost magical. Satellite defense systems, cutting-edge missile batteries, and experimental plasma weapons looked like children's toys against the approaching armada. General Maria Rodriguez gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles white. She had spent her entire career preparing for potential extraterrestrial threats, but nothing could have prepared her for this moment. The tactical readouts told a brutal story. Humanity's entire orbital defense network would be obliterated in less than 17 minutes. "Activate Emergency Protocol Omega," she commanded, her voice steady despite the crushing weight of imminent defeat. Around the world, something extraordinary began to happen. Not panic, not surrender, but a coordinated, almost impossible response. In research facilities from Beijing to Buenos Aires, in military installations from Moscow to Mumbai, teams that had been working on seemingly unrelated projects suddenly found their work converging. Quantum physicists, computer engineers, material scientists, and military strategists began sharing information at an unprecedented rate. The Stellar Alliance's initial scans had missed a critical characteristic of human civilization: its ability to adapt with breathtaking speed and unexpected creativity. Captain Vorn's tactical displays began to show anomalies. Small human satellites, originally designed for communication and research, were rapidly being reconfigured. Their trajectories changed. Their systems interconnected in ways that defied the Alliance's predictive models. Recalibrating defensive protocols, the ship's artificial intelligence announced, its perfect voice carrying a hint of confusion for the first time in the Alliance's history. The human orbital platforms were dying, but they were dying in a manner that was sending back unprecedented amounts of data. Each destroyed satellite became a sensor, each explosion a complex information packet that revealed more about human technological potential than years of preliminary scans. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the general, watched from a hidden research facility deep beneath the Andes Mountains. Her team had been working on a radical approach to quantum communication and adaptive networked systems. What the military saw as a devastating attack, she saw as an unprecedented opportunity. "We're not just defending," she muttered to her team. "We're learning." The Luminous Spear's captain felt the first true moment of uncertainty in his centuries-long military career. The human response defied all known tactical algorithms. Instead of a straightforward defense, their systems were transforming. Destroyed platforms became distributed sensor networks. Damaged communication satellites reconfigured themselves into complex information relays. It was as if the entire human technological infrastructure was a living, breathing organism, wounded but far from defeated. In orbit, the battle looked like a catastrophic defeat for humanity. Massive explosions illuminated the darkness of space. Entire orbital stations disappeared in silent, brilliant eruptions. To any external observer, it would seem the invasion was proceeding exactly as the Stellar Alliance had predicted. But beneath the destruction, Something was brewing. A response that would reshape the understanding of technological adaptation forever. The first strike was complete. The humans were apparently defeated, but the war had only just begun, and the Stellar Alliance had no idea what was coming. The hidden research facility beneath the Andes Mountains hummed with an electric intensity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers dancing across quantum adaptive interface panels. Around her, a team of researchers from disciplines that would have never collaborated mere weeks ago now worked with a singular, urgent purpose. "We're not dealing with a conventional invasion," Elena explained to the assembled team. Physicists stood shoulder to shoulder with computer engineers, biological researchers, and systems theorists. The room represented humanity's most radical approach to problem solving. Total, unrestricted collaboration. On the display, fragments of alien technological data danced and reconfigured. Each piece of information recovered from the destroyed orbital platforms was a puzzle piece in a much larger mystery. The Stellar Alliance's technology was unlike anything humans had ever encountered, yet that very complexity became its greatest vulnerability. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, a quantum computing expert, pointed to a complex data pattern. "Their communication systems rely on predictive algorithms," he explained. "They anticipate responses based on historical data. But what if we create responses that have no historical precedent?" The concept was revolutionary. While the Stellar Alliance had perfected technological prediction, they had overlooked the most unpredictable element in the universe: human creativity. In research facilities around the world, similar conversations were happening. The initial invasion had done something the aliens never intended. It had unified humanity in a way no previous challenge ever had. National boundaries dissolved. Competitive research became collaborative. Every human became a potential problem solver. Satellite fragments were retrieved from impact sites across the globe. Governments that would have previously guarded such technology jealously now shared every scrap of information. Universities opened their most secure research databases. Military installations became centers of scientific innovation. Elena's team began developing what they called adaptive quantum disruptors, systems designed to exploit the tiny inconsistencies in the alien technological framework. Their approach wasn't about matching alien technology, but about finding its fundamental weaknesses. "They expect linear responses," Elena explained to General Rodriguez during a secure briefing. "We're going to give them something completely non-linear." The first prototype looked nothing like a weapon. It was a complex network of quantum-entangled processors, biological neural network interfaces, and adaptive algorithmic systems. Traditional military minds would have dismissed it as incomprehensible, but Elena understood something profound. True innovation doesn't look like what came before. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the Stellar Alliance continued to monitor the human planet. Their initial scans had shown a civilization apparently crippled by the first wave of the invasion. Their predictive models suggested complete capitulation within standard integration cycles. They were wrong. Captain Vorn of the Luminous Spear received the first anomalous reports. Small technological signatures were emerging from the human planet, signals that didn't match any known communication or defensive protocols. They seemed to emerge from multiple sources simultaneously, interconnected in ways that defied standard analytical models. Recalibrating analysis, the ship's artificial intelligence announced, its perfect voice carrying a trace of uncertainty for the first time in the Alliance's history. The human response was nothing like any invasion the Stellar Alliance had ever encountered. Instead of a straightforward defensive strategy, they were creating something entirely new. Each destroyed piece of technology became a source of learning. Each lost satellite transformed into a distributed sensor network. Elena's team had discovered something fundamental about the alien technology. Their predictive systems relied on absolute certainty, but human technology, messy, collaborative, unpredictable, operated on an entirely different principle. "We're not trying to beat their technology," Elena told her team. "We're going to make their technology irrelevant." As the first prototype of the quantum disruptor came online, something extraordinary happened. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was a complex, living system of information and potential. The Stellar Alliance had come to conquer. Instead, they had awakened something they could never have anticipated. Humanity's true resistance was just beginning. The solar system transformed into a battlefield that defied every known principle of cosmic conflict. Abandoned mining platforms in the asteroid belt suddenly sprang to life, their original purpose of resource extraction forgotten. Each platform became a node in a complex, living network of resistance. Small drones, originally designed for scientific research and resource mapping, began to move in patterns that seemed almost impossible. They swarmed and dispersed with a fluidity that made no sense to traditional military algorithms. Where the Stellar Alliance expected linear formations, they encountered chaos. Lieutenant Michael Chen sat in a hidden control center deep within the Martian underground research base. His fingers danced across adaptive interface panels that were changing faster than the systems could be documented. Around him, a team of operators from every conceivable background worked in perfect synchronization. "Drone Swarm Delta 9, redirect," he commanded. The drones, each no larger than a human hand, responded with impossible precision. They weren't just machines. They were part of a living, breathing system of technological resistance. Captain Vorn of the Luminous Spear watched in growing concern as the human response defied every tactical projection. Their massive warship, a pinnacle of galactic military technology, found itself surrounded by thousands of tiny, seemingly insignificant devices that moved with impossible coordination. The drones weren't attempting to destroy the alien ship directly. Instead, they were collecting data, probing defensive systems, finding the most minute vulnerabilities. Each pass was a complex information-gathering mission that rewrote the understanding of technological warfare. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's quantum disruptor systems had transformed military technology into something entirely new. These were not traditional weapons. They were adaptive, learning systems that evolved with each interaction. Where alien technology sought perfect predictability, human technology embraced uncertainty. In the research facilities across Earth, teams worked around the clock. Sleep became optional. Collaboration became instinctive. Universities, military installations, private research centers, all barriers dissolved in the face of the existential challenge. The asteroid belt became humanity's first true battleground. Mining platforms converted into complex sensor networks. Defunct communication satellites transformed into distributed weapon systems. Each destroyed piece of technology became a source of new information, new potential. They're treating destruction as a form of communication. Vorn's artificial intelligence noted, a hint of confusion in its perfect voice. The Stellar Alliance had never encountered a civilization that could learn so quickly, adapt so completely. Lieutenant Chen watched as a group of drones sacrificed themselves to gather critical information about the alien ship's defensive systems. Each lost drone was not a failure, but a successful data point in a much larger strategy. The human approach to warfare was fundamentally different. Each loss was a form of learning. Across the solar system, humanity's response continued to evolve. Asteroid mining equipment became improvised sensor platforms. Communication satellites transformed into complex information warfare systems. Scientific research vessels became adaptive combat nodes. The Stellar Alliance had come expecting a straightforward conquest. Instead, they found themselves in a conflict that redefined the very concept of technological warfare. "We're not fighting to win," Elena told her team during a rare moment of rest. "We're fighting to understand." Captain Vorn received increasingly alarming reports. The human technological response defied every known principle of military engagement. Their systems were not just defensive, they were transformative. Each interaction changed the very nature of the conflict. The most advanced civilization in the galaxy found itself outmaneuvered by a species they had initially classified as primitive. Humanity's strength lay not in superior technology, but in its ability to learn, adapt, and reimagine the very principles of conflict. The battle for the solar system was far from over, but humanity had already changed the rules of engagement forever. The communication module aboard the luminous sphere pulsed with an unprecedented phenomenon. Strange transmissions from the human planet defied every known communication protocol. They were not threats. They were not defensive strategies. They were something entirely different. Cultural broadcasts began infiltrating the Stellar Alliance's communication networks. Music from remote villages in India played alongside scientific lectures from Brazilian research centers. Ancient poetry from Chinese archives merged with contemporary art from African digital platforms. Each transmission carried something the aliens had never encountered: pure, unfiltered human experience. Captain Vorn's neural interfaces struggled to process the incoming data. These were not standard communication signals. They were complex emotional and intellectual ecosystems that carried layers of meaning beyond simple information transfer. A traditional folk song from a small Peruvian mountain village suddenly played across the alien communication systems. The melody carried centuries of human struggle, hope, and resilience. Embedded within its rhythms were subtle technological signatures that probed the very foundations of the alien communication networks. Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood the strategy perfectly. Humanity's greatest weapon was not its technology, but its ability to communicate complexity. "We're not just sending information," she explained to the global coordination team. "We're sending context. We're sending soul." The Stellar Alliance's hierarchical, logic-driven command structure began to fracture. Their communication systems, designed for perfect information transfer, could not process the multilayered human transmissions. Each broadcast carried multiple levels of meaning: emotional, cultural, technological. In the research facilities, teams from every corner of the globe worked with unprecedented collaboration. A quantum physicist from Japan worked alongside a cultural anthropologist from Nigeria. A computer engineer from India collaborated with a traditional storyteller from Peru. Their diversity became their greatest strength. The alien systems began to experience something they had never encountered: cognitive dissonance. Psychological warfare took on an entirely new meaning. The human broadcasts were not aggressive. They were invitations to understanding. Each transmission carried the complexity of human experience: the pain, the joy, the struggle, the hope. Captain Vorn watched in growing confusion as the communication patterns defied every predictive model. The transmissions carried technological signatures that seemed to change with each iteration. They were living, breathing systems of information that evolved in real time. A traditional Japanese tea ceremony merged with cutting-edge mathematical equations. A Brazilian carnival performance contained embedded quantum communication protocols. An indigenous Australian Dreamtime story carried complex technological information. The Stellar Alliance had encountered thousands of civilizations. They had perfected the art of technological assimilation, but they had never met a species that could turn its entire cultural experience into a form of resistance. "We are learning," the global human coordination team repeated. Each cultural transmission was a probe, a way of understanding the alien technology, while simultaneously challenging its fundamental assumptions. The communication networks became a battlefield of a different kind, not a conflict of destruction, but a conflict of understanding. Humanity was not just defending itself. It was attempting to communicate on a level far beyond traditional technological engagement. Captain Vorn's neural interfaces began to experience something akin to emotional confusion. The human transmissions carried something that defied logical processing, a quality the luminary had long ago engineered out of their own civilization: empathy, complexity, uncertainty. The most advanced civilization in the galaxy found itself confronted with a species that refused to be understood through traditional technological means. Humanity's strength lay not in superior weaponry, but in its ability to communicate complexity. The battle for understanding had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Global Coordination Center looked nothing like a traditional military command post. Screens displayed complex, interconnected networks that pulsed with living data. Scientists, engineers, artists, and strategists worked side by side, their distinctions blurring into a single, unified purpose. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of this extraordinary hub, her hands moving across quantum adaptive interface panels. Around her, a plan was taking shape, a coordinated global effort that would redefine the concept of technological warfare. Quantum Entangled Communication Network is at 87% synchronization, announced Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. Repurposed satellite systems formed a complex web that extended far beyond Earth's traditional communication infrastructure. The plan was audacious. Humanity would not just defend. They would transform the entire battlefield. Experimental quantum communication platforms, originally developed for theoretical research, now became the backbone of a revolutionary strategy. Each satellite, each communication node, would become part of a living, adaptive system that could reconfigure itself faster than the Stellar Alliance could analyze. Lieutenant Michael Chen monitored the planetary defense platforms. What appeared to be destruction was actually a carefully orchestrated transformation. Damaged communication satellites were being rebuilt into distributed sensor networks. Orbital research stations became complex information relays. Captain Vorn of the Luminous Spear received the first indications of the human strategy. Their communication networks were no longer behaving like traditional defensive systems. They were evolving, adapting, transforming with each interaction. Recalibrating analysis, the ship's artificial intelligence announced, its perfect voice carrying a growing sense of uncertainty. The human approach defied every known principle of technological engagement. They were not trying to match the Stellar Alliance's technology. They were creating something entirely new. Dr. Rodriguez understood the fundamental weakness of the alien technological system. The Stellar Alliance's predictive algorithms relied on absolute certainty. Human technology embraced uncertainty as its greatest strength. "We're not fighting to win," she told the global coordination team. "We're fighting to understand. We're fighting to transform." Across the solar system, abandoned research platforms became active nodes in a complex, living network. Mining equipment in the asteroid belt transformed into sophisticated sensor arrays. Communication satellites reconfigured themselves into adaptive weapon systems. The first strike would not be a traditional attack. It would be a complete reimagining of technological conflict. Quantum entangled communication networks began to probe the Stellar Alliance's technological infrastructure. Each probe was not an attack, but a form of complex communication. Humanity was learning, adapting, understanding at a speed that defied traditional technological principles. Lieutenant Chen watched as groups of repurposed research drones moved with impossible coordination. They were not attempting to destroy the alien ship directly. They were gathering information, understanding the most minute vulnerabilities in the alien technological framework. The global coordination team represented humanity's true strength. Scientists worked alongside artists. Military strategists collaborated with cultural researchers. Each perspective became a critical component of a much larger strategy. Captain Vorn received increasingly alarming reports. The human technological response was not just defensive. It was transformative. Each interaction changed the very nature of the conflict. Experimental quantum communication platforms began to send complex, multilayered signals that carried technological signatures, cultural information, and adaptive learning algorithms. They were not just communication systems. They were living, breathing entities of information and potential. The most advanced civilization in the galaxy found itself confronted with a species that refused to be understood through traditional technological means. Humanity's strength lay not in superior weaponry, but in its ability to learn, adapt, and reimagine the very principles of technological engagement. The solar system had become a complex, living battlefield, and humanity was just beginning to show its true potential. The space between Earth and the alien fleet became a canvas of technological warfare, unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Quantum adaptive systems danced through the void, transforming the very nature of cosmic conflict. Captain Vorn of the Luminous Spear experienced something unprecedented in his centuries of military service: genuine uncertainty. The human response had evolved beyond any predictive model. What began as a simple colonization mission had transformed into a fundamental challenge to everything the Stellar Alliance understood about technological engagement. The remaining alien forces found themselves trapped in a living network of information and potential. Each attempt to attack created more opportunities for human adaptation. Defensive systems that should have been impenetrable became conduits of learning and transformation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the Global Coordination Center, her team representing a cross-section of human potential that defied traditional understanding. Quantum physicists worked alongside cultural anthropologists. Military strategists collaborated with artists and musicians. Each perspective became a weapon more powerful than any traditional armament. "We're not destroying," Elena explained to her team. "We're communicating. We're understanding." The battle was no longer about physical destruction. It had become a conflict of technological and cultural paradigms. Humanity's adaptive systems continued to evolve with each interaction, learning and transforming faster than the Stellar Alliance could comprehend. Lieutenant Michael Chen monitored the distributed network of adaptive defense systems. What appeared chaotic to the aliens was actually a perfectly synchronized global response. Satellites, research platforms, communication networks, everything had become part of a living, breathing defensive organism. Captain Vorn's neural interfaces struggled to process the incoming information. The human technological response defied every principle of warfare the Stellar Alliance had developed over millennia. They were not fighting to win in a traditional sense. They were fighting to demonstrate a fundamentally different approach to existence. Quantum-entangled communication networks probed the alien technological infrastructure. Each probe was a complex message, part technological challenge, part cultural invitation. The human systems carried layers of meaning that went far beyond simple attack or defense. The Luminous Spear found itself surrounded by thousands of adaptive systems that seemed to move with impossible coordination. They were not traditional weapons. They were living information networks that learned and transformed with each interaction. "We are understanding," the human coordination team repeated. It was both a strategy and a philosophy. Across the solar system, humanity's response continued to evolve. Mining platforms in the asteroid belt became complex sensor networks. Defunct communication satellites transformed into adaptive information relays. Each destroyed piece of technology became a source of new potential. The battle became a demonstration of humanity's true strength. Not superior technology, but the ability to learn, adapt, and reimagine the very principles of technological engagement. Captain Vorn experienced something the Luminary had engineered out of their civilization generations ago: a sense of genuine wonder. The human response was not just a technological strategy. It was a form of communication more complex than any language. The alien fleet's defensive systems began to break down, not through traditional destruction, but through a complete reimagining of technological interaction. Each probe, each interaction, carried layers of information that challenged the fundamental assumptions of the Stellar Alliance's technological framework. Dr. Rodriguez understood the true nature of the conflict. They were not just defending against an invasion. They were demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to existence: collaboration over domination, adaptation over rigid control, understanding over conquest. The space around Earth became a complex, living system of information and potential. Humanity had transformed the very concept of technological warfare. The Stellar Alliance found itself confronted with a species that refused to be understood through traditional means. Their most advanced technology became obsolete in the face of human creativity, adaptability, and collective potential. The final confrontation was not about destruction. It was about communication. It was about understanding. And nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the conflict defied every known principle of galactic interaction. The Stellar Alliance fleet, once the most advanced technological force in the known universe, now drifted in a state of complete transformation. Captain Vorn stood on the observation deck of the luminous sphere, his neural interfaces struggling to process the profound changes that had occurred. What began as a simple colonization mission had become something far more significant, a fundamental challenge to everything the luminary civilization understood about intelligence, adaptation, and existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez led the first diplomatic approach. It was not a traditional negotiation. It was an invitation to understanding. "We're not seeking victory," she communicated through the complex quantum adaptive networks. "We're seeking dialogue." The surviving members of the Stellar Alliance experienced something unprecedented in their millennia of galactic exploration. The humans had not destroyed them. They had transformed them. Quantum adaptive communication networks continued to pulse with an extraordinary complexity. Each transmission carried layers of meaning, technological information, cultural context, emotional depth. The aliens found themselves confronted with a form of communication that went far beyond simple information transfer. Representatives from every corner of Earth gathered in a global coordination center. Scientists worked alongside artists. Military strategists collaborated with cultural researchers. Their diversity became their greatest strength. Captain Vorn's neural interfaces began to perceive something entirely new. The human approach was not about conquest or submission. It was about mutual understanding. Each interaction carried an invitation to see existence from a fundamentally different perspective. The Stellar Alliance had conquered thousands of civilizations. They had perfected the art of technological assimilation, but they had never encountered a species that saw conflict as an opportunity for mutual transformation. Dr. Rodriguez understood the profound nature of the moment. This was not a victory. This was a conversation. Quantum-entangled communication networks continued to pulse with extraordinary complexity. They carried not just information, but entire ecosystems of human experience. Art merged with scientific discovery. Cultural traditions intertwined with technological innovation. The aliens began to understand something profound. Humanity's strength was not in its technology. It was in its ability to learn, to adapt, to reimagine the very principles of existence. Across the solar system, the remnants of the invasion became sources of mutual exploration. Damaged research platforms transformed into collaborative study centers. Orbital systems became shared communication networks. "We are different," Elena communicated to the Stellar Alliance representatives. "And that difference is our greatest strength." The galactic paradigm began to shift. The luminary civilization, which had spent millennia perfecting technological control, found itself confronted with a fundamentally different approach to existence. Humanity offered something radical: genuine cooperation. The surviving Stellar Alliance members experienced a collective transformation. Their neural interfaces, designed for perfect information processing, began to perceive existence in entirely new ways. They encountered complexity, uncertainty, emotional depth, qualities they had engineered out of their own civilization generations ago. Captain Vorn looked out at the transformed space around Earth. What had begun as a mission of conquest had become an invitation to understanding. The human approach was not about defeating an enemy. It was about expanding the very concept of intelligence. Global human teams continued to extend invitations of collaboration. Scientific research became a shared endeavor. Cultural exchanges became methods of mutual understanding. Technology transformed from a tool of conquest to a means of connection. The universe would never be the same again. Humanity had not just survived. They had transformed the very principles of galactic interaction, and their journey was just beginning.